Welcome back. Congress wants the Federal Aviation Administration to promote investments in infrastructure for space transportation. The Government Accountability Office has new recommendations for how the FAA can incentivize trips to space. Heather Krause is Director of Physical Infrastructure Issues at the Government Accountability Office. Heather, thanks for coming on the program. Your work strikes me as kind of a good news, bad news story. The good news that strikes me is that launch capacity infrastructure seems to be good enough for the commercial providers and for the launch providers. The bad news is the FAA is not really potentially thinking about all the things that they could be thinking about. Am I reading this work right?
Yeah, that hits on the key messages from our report. We did talk with launch providers, and they, like you said, they found that the current infrastructure is generally sufficient to meet the demand for commercial space. Where some of the providers as well as the site operators differ is where they see the infrastructure going in the future. They differ in terms of where they see the need for infrastructure, the location of it, as well as the type of infrastructure. And a lot of that will depend on how the industry evolves. The types of technology that support the commercial space industry will drive the type of infrastructure that's needed.
You write in this work, FAA's initial draft report was limited because it focused on only 2 existing FAA programs rather than a range of options. What's that draft report that you're referring to there, and what options did FAA potentially miss out on?
So the Congress in its FAA Reauthorization Act of 2018 mandated that FAA examine and make recommendations on ways to promote and facilitate greater investment in space transportation infrastructure. They're in the process of drafting that report and respond to that mandate. There's other elements that they're responding to in it as well. What they shared with us as they're pulling that report together and it's under review is that they're looking at 2 existing grant programs to make recommendations or consider and describe to the Congress. The first one being the Space Transportation Infrastructure Matching Grant Program, or STIM it's referred to, as well as the Airport Infrastructure Program, or AIP. When we spoke with stakeholders, both had some concerns about those programs in its current form. And FAA really selected those based on the fact that they would be easy for them to administer, given they have some existing statutory authority for those programs, and that they had administered STIM grants previously in the 2010 to 2012 fiscal years.
So I want to connect that then to a passage later on in the work. You write, leading practices in infrastructure investment emphasize the importance of conducting an examination of potential approaches. It strikes me then, in the context of what you just said, potential approaches is maybe the most important word in that sentence, isn't it?
Yeah, what we're recommending in our report is that FAA look at a range of potential options, both in terms of assessing the 2 programs that they're considering, but also that there are other options for assessing or for financing transportation infrastructure, things ranging from direct loans, loan guarantees, and other financing tools, tax incentives. There's also alternatives to providing federal assistance that may also provide support to the transportation infrastructure that's needed. And so what we had recommended to FAA is to do a broader assessment and lay out the trade-offs for the Congress in terms of what to help them make better decisions on what types of the way to support the infrastructure, as well as maximize any effective federal investment on transportation infrastructure.
Do your recommendations include which ones of those options FAA should consider, or just that they should consider a more broad selection than they have?
It's really suggesting that they give and prepare information on a broader selection of options and lay out the trade-offs. This is really based on the fact that FAA does have a deep understanding and ties to the commercial space transportation industry and can best assess the types of trade-offs Congress would want to consider in supporting space transportation infrastructure.
You write toward the end of the highlights page, FAA may overlook other options that better meet federal policy goals and maximize the effect of any federal investment. Is that really the main issue here, that where the funds go may be impacted by their not looking at these other options?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, it is by not doing a broader assessment or examination of options, FAA may be missing out on potential options that could better support the space transportation industry.
What kind of follow-up have you gotten from FAA on this?
In response to our report, FAA partially concurred with the recommendation. They anticipate, working to finalize the report, which they anticipate describing those two grant programs. But they don't feel that they should be doing an assessment, a broader assessment of options. We believe, again, because FAA has a deep understanding of the commercial transportation industry, they're in the best position to assess what kind of trade-offs might be considered in supporting commercial space transportation.
Heather, thanks very much for coming on. It's great to have you on the program.
Thank you.